Hey, what's up, YouTube? So, somebody asked me the other day what advice I would give to them on how to successfully transition from the United States to Mexico. If you've ever considered moving out of the United States and specifically into Mexico, I've been here for just over 6 years now and learned a lot in my experiences. So, based on my experiences, here are three pieces of advice I would give to anyone who's moving from the US to Mexico. Let's go. I think probably the most important thing that will improve your chances of having a successful transition to a life abroad is that you're really framing this as you're moving towards something and not moving away from something. And it's a really kind of a fine line. It's a fine distinction, but the way that you're framing that really changes your approach when you actually are moved into the other country, the new country, whether it's Mexico or anywhere else, because you bring with yourself is your frame of mind, your mentality. And if you're holding on to kind of all the negative things that you're coming away from, you're not opening yourself up to all that is good to where you're moving to. Now, I understand from a lot of my friends back in the United States right now, things are pretty stressful. Things are pretty bleak from from what I understand. And so it's easy to really focus on all the negativity and saying, I got to get out of here, when instead you should be going, oh my gosh, there's a new life that awaits me in Mexico or wherever it is in the world. It's a life of adventure. It's a life of new cultures and beautiful surroundings. And you can frame it as kind of a fresh start. Think of it as a way to really change up your approach to life, as opposed to just running away from all that is bad. Now, when we moved over 6.5 years ago, yes, there were definitely things that I wanted to get away from in Los Angeles. It wasn't my ideal place to raise a family. And, the traffic and the stresses and all of that went along with life living in Los Angeles in the United States, there were negative aspects to it. But the way that we landed and came here in Mexico was, oh my gosh, look at this beautiful country. Look at these fabulous adventures that we can go on, and we just gave ourselves this gift of having extra time, and not stressing about the little things in life, not worrying about politics, not worried about, what's going on in this cycle of the news. But we really came here and said, okay, we're living a brand new start in life. We're going to forget about all those negative aspects of what we didn't like about the United States, and instead we're just going to focus on the positivity of being here in this new place, in this totally foreign world, pun intended. So I think for us, or for me specifically, that just really changed and allowed me to really kind of expand and move into Mexico, with a sense of wonder and positivity. And I think that's probably my number one piece of advice to anyone who's thinking about becoming an expat, is move towards something and not away from something. Okay, my second piece of advice is this: try the local food. Don't worry, he's alive. Food is such an important part of any culture. And if you're here for the actual adventure of your life, then you really should try the local food. Now, here in the Yucatan, that means cochinita pibil, it means salbutes, it means marquesitas from the food carts. But you really should experience kind of what the locals experience. If you really want to expand your life and this whole experience of living abroad, you really should try the food that is native to the area. This, for example, is a pitaya, or in the States, we used to call it a dragon fruit. So it's a fruit that is grown in Mexico, and they're really abundant, especially in the fall. Right now, they're in the market, and they've gotten a little bit more expensive in the past few years that we've been here, but still very affordable. So beautiful, beautiful piece of fruit here. Look at that. How gorgeous is that? So sometimes what I'll do is put this in a smoothie. I think it adds kind of a really nice, fun flavor to it. It gives it a nice pink hue as well. Um, but what we do with pitayas too is sometimes we just cut them up and put them into a bowl, and they taste delicious. So if you find yourself moving abroad, instead of going for, all the usual places that you might go to. So for example, here in Merida, we have Carl's Jr., there's Burger King, there's Wendy's here now. Starbucks is popping up more and more frequently. And it does, occasionally it does kind of give you a taste of a little bit of comfort of home, which you need every now and then. But try to avoid those places as much as you can, and really go to the local shops, go to the tiny little pueblos, and see what those folks are eating on a Sunday afternoon, and try some of that, because you may not like it all, and that's just fine. But it will expand your horizons, and give you different tastes that you wouldn't otherwise get to experience. So in these pitayas, what I like to do is just drizzle a little bit of this is a local grown honey. It's from one of our neighbors here in the Pueblo, and she raises melipona bees, which are if you don't know what a melipona bee is, they're stingless bees. So they no stinger, so very friendly bees, and produce some just incredible honey. And the honey from the Mayans, this particular honey is really was thought to have very medicinal qualities. So you'll find a lot of this honey kind of in the area. But the bees, as I understand, are a little bit endangered, so a little bit troubling. But this honey is delicious. I just put a drizzle on that, and then I just throw a little bit of salt on top of that, and it's a delightful little dragon fruit treat. So try the food. My third bit of advice is this. And this should really go without saying, but come on, you gotta learn the language. So my third piece of advice is you must learn the language of the country that you're moving to. So you can't expect, nor should you ever expect, someone from another country that you're living in to speak English. It's really kind of gross that a lot of people come here to Mexico and expect the Mexicans to speak English. So you're going to really improve the richness of your experience by learning the other language. Again, when you learn new languages, you kind of get to understand the culture a little bit better, because the language is formulated around the culture. So here in Merida, almost nobody speaks English. As you go into Centro and you start to get to some of the more touristy type areas, I'm hearing a lot more English than I ever have. But 6 years ago, there certainly was very little English being spoken. One of my regrets was not actually trying to learn more Spanish before we moved here. I took a couple years in college, but that was a long time ago, and certainly wasn't enough. So I had to really, get here and immerse myself in the Spanish language to really start to understand it. And then I took a very kind of active approach to taking some online classes and some classes in person to help get me through. And you'll also learn that the Spanish that I learned in college very different than the Spanish here in the Yucatan. There's a lot of Mayan influences here, and so a lot of the words that they use are not the same as those who might live, in the western part of Mexico or the northern part of Mexico. A lot of slang words that you pick up too. So here's one tip for a way that you can start practicing your Spanish before you move to Mexico is do it on Netflix. So just simply go to Netflix. Every title is going to have the ability to adjust the subtitles as well as the audio. So what I suggest you do is put the subtitle in English and listen to the audio in Spanish. And I always like to use the cartoons or Pixar movies because it feels like the language is a little bit easier to learn that way. If you start to feel more advanced, go ahead and knock yourself out and watch the big time feature movies. So once you have your options set, go ahead and sit back, enjoy.
Algunos dirían que creció para convertirse en el productor más grandioso de la ciudad.
So those are just 3 simple pieces of advice I would give to anybody who's considering moving to another country. So if you find those helpful and maybe you're interested in more, I've got a lot more advice where that came from. So let me know below if you'd like to see more videos about this. Otherwise, have a great day, everyone.